네, 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 노블리 글로벌 평화포럼 사회를 맡은 아나운서 이승기입니다. 반갑습니다. 네, 먼저 무엇보다 이렇게 포럼의 마지막 날까지 함께 해주시고 계시는 모든 온라인 그리고 오프라인 참석자분들께 진심으로 깊은 감사의 인사를 전해드립니다. 이번 학술세션 세 번째 주제는 상호 이해와 화해 증진에 필요한 인권 평화 교육입니다. 모두가 주지하시다시피 노블리 사건은 한국전쟁 초기 유엔군의 일환으로 한국을 돕기 위해 참전했던 미국에 의해서 발생한 민간 희생 사건입니다. 우리는 노블리 사건을 통해서 어떤 전쟁, 분쟁, 갈등 상황 속에서도 민간인의 생명과 인권을 보호해야 한다는 교훈을 얻게 되었습니다. 이에 앞으로 노블리 사건과 같은 비극적인 사건을 재발 방지하고 과거의 상처를 딛고 상호 이해와 화해가 가능한 미래를 건설하기 위해 다음 세대를 위한 인권 평화 교육 무엇보다 중요하다고 생각됩니다. 이번 학술 세션 세 번째는 이런 메시지를 보다 널리 공유하고자 마련되었는데요. 다양한 기관에서 실질적인 인권 평화 교육에 매진하고 계신 전문가분들께서 함께 해주시겠습니다. 상호 이해와 화해 증진에 필요한 인권 평화 교육 주제로 한 심도 깊은 대화 여러분 지금부터 함께 만나보시죠.
Education for peace and human rights has been promoted at Museums for Peace. Peace Academy, organized by Nogundi International Peace Foundation, should be known as a good example. There have been conflicts between the Republic of Korea and Japan, especially in terms of historical concepts. What would be possible to promote peace and human rights? The Peace Academy held in 2017 shows that students who participated in it learned much, especially unknown history, and began to think how to promote peace and human rights. It was found by students' essays that the results of the Peace Academy shows that the aims were achieved well. Students learn different perspectives of history by lectures, visit to Nogundi Peace Memorial and Jeju 43 Peace Memorial Hall, and the sites where incidents happened, which made it possible for them to think what to do to promote peace and human rights for a better future. The Peace Academy was organized by the Nogundi International Peace Foundation and the Jeju 43 Peace Foundation from August 7 to 12 in 2017. The goals were to enable students to learn and dream peace together, to enable students to become peacemakers and leaders in their own countries, to showcase the host nation and the host organization's work in building a culture of peace. 27 students from 10 countries attended the Peace Academy. It should be pointed out that there were 3 students who participated in the Peace Academy in 2016 and attended it again and helped new participants. This is because the content of the Peace Academy was so educational and interesting in terms of not only history, but also culture and nature. A student mentioned the importance of memorials or museums for peace because it is the place where they can learn historical facts which are not available at school and the media in Japan. It also made the Japanese participants learn about Japan's colonialism in Korea and Japan's responsibility for Japan's colonialism in Korea. Students were born after World War II, but it is Japanese people's responsibility to deal with Japan's dark history honestly so that same mistakes will never be repeated. There has been a serious issue of school textbooks in which Japan's aggression of Asian countries is not honestly written, and many students don't know Japan's colonization of Korea, Korean women who were forced to work as sex slaves for the Japanese military during World War II, and so forth. The media is also problematic because it tends to put an emphasis on conflicts without showing citizens' efforts for peace and reconciliation. Conflicts between two countries should be dealt with politically, economically, and socially, but academic and cultural solutions should be also considered. The case of the Peace Academy in 2017 would be an excellent example to promote peace, human rights, and reconciliation for a better future. The Peace Academy was a good opportunity for students to learn real history, exchange ideas with other students, and learn different perspectives of history, make good friends, and think what they can do for a better future. They visited memorials and historical sites. Academic lectures and workshops were given by professors, which made them think history, peace, and human rights deeply. It was good experiences for students to visit various sightseeing spots and learn Korean culture and nature. The students visited the Nogundi Peace Memorial and the Jeju 43 Peace Memorial Hall. What did they learn and what are their impressions? A student from Singapore wrote that he was most impressed by Chairman Chung's dedication to his father's work and his persistence in spreading the word of peace through Nogundi continued existence. Ideas of students from Taiwan, Syria, Cambodia, and Japan are written in my article. Students from various countries learn not only Korean history, but also other history, which made them think of history in their own countries and what they can do for peace for a better future. Many students pointed out the importance of studying history, especially the importance of the visit to sites where incidents happened in the past. A student wrote her impression of visiting the Twin Tunnels and the Nogundi Peace Memorial is, I felt extremely sad. I think that it is important to visit actual sites when we learn history and make peace. Please read my article because this is too simple. The field trips made the students think not only of history, but also the future of Korea, their own countries, and the world. So you can see the photos at Twin Tunnel, also at Jeju 43 Peace Memorial Hall. These photos were taken by students. Many students wrote that they learned the importance of history for peace. Responses by students from Nepal, Japan, and Indonesia are introduced in my article. Students learn much, not only from lectures and workshops, but also from discussion with friends during and after the lectures and workshops, and made new friends in the process. Japanese students' impression. In Nogundi, it was fun to beat Korean drum. In Jeju Island, all the views are really beautiful, especially sea. It seems that students enjoyed cultural events and also learning Korean language during the Peace Academy. It is certain that such experiences motivated them to study Korean culture and language more in the future. You can see the biggest drum in the world and students playing Korean drums. The Peace Academy was very stimulating, motivated students to study hard, and they will keep in touch in the future, which would lead to the world peace. A Japanese student wrote, Before I participated in this program, I didn't have images about peace, and I thought studying the history is to study what is ended. But in this program, I understood that there is no end in studying history because we need to keep thinking why it happened, what had been the better decision at that time, and what the young generation can do to keep and spread peace. The Peace Academy can be a very good example of promoting education for peace and human rights at Museums for Peace. All the students expressed their deep gratitude to the Nogundi International Peace Foundation and the Jeju 43 Peace Foundation in their essays. The Book of Museums for Peace Worldwide is available on the INNP website, in which over 300 museums for peace are introduced, including the Nogundi Peace Memorial and the Jeju 43 Peace Memorial Hall. The website is as follows. Because of the limit of the time, I couldn't talk enough about the Peace Academy, so I hope you will read my article and enjoy reading students' impressions. So deep gratitude from all the students and myself. Thank you for listening.
Namaste. My name is Narabhadu Saut. I'm from Nepal. Today I'm going to present my research paper. The title of my research paper is Theatre or Memory on Making Memorialization of the Maoist Insurgency in Nepal. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of 2020 No Gundri Global Peace Forum for inviting me to participate in the forum. Now I'm going to start my paper. The outline of my paper is as follows. Briefly, I will discuss about the introduction, the key literature I have reviewed, the research questions, methodology, results, discussion and conclusion, and some of the references that I've consulted with, and last, my contact information. Now I'm going to start about the introduction of the research paper. Looking at the background of the research paper, this deals with the context of Nepal and then the Maoist insurgency in Nepal. As you may know, Nepal is situated in the South Asian continent. This is between India and China. It's a small country, and currently it's a secular country with a majority of Hindus as residents, and also known for the Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world, and the Lord Buddha, the light of Asia. Nepal went to the Maoist insurgency from 1996 to 2006. It took more than 17,000 lives. Still, there are 1,300 people are disappeared, and their situation, their condition is unknown to date, and it cost billions of rupees in human casualties and infrastructures. The Maoist insurgency came to an end in 2006 with signing comprehensive peace accord between the then Maoist insurgent and then the government. As per the CPA, many agreements were made and implemented, but one of the most important factors of the peace building process is dealing with the transitional justice is yet to be completed. There are some of the activities that are to be addressed for the sustainable peace in a proper way. Likewise, as the long-term peace building process, the different organizations have been supporting in building relationship. That means the broken relationship between the insurgents and the conflicting parties, and also they are working to enhance the emotional connection between the individual, between the families, between the communities, from community level to the national level. It means they're working to promote reconciliation and the memorialization as well. The objective of writing this paper is to explore the existing narrative that are or that were being experienced by the relatives or the family members of victims. The victims refer here those people who have been killed or impossibly disappeared, people in the community, and there need to be addressed so far. At national level, the Transitional Justice Commission are also formed and they are working, but their conclusion is not made so far. The major literatures I have consulted while writing these research papers are I have consulted with the John Paul Lederach. He talks about the moral imagination, and I've talked about the Cynthia Quinn. She also advocates for the art, for the peace building, and then the reconciliation. And likewise, the Simon Robbins, he is one of the pioneer person who have studied a lot on the transitional justice system in Nepal. And also, I have consulted with some organizational references, like the Impunity was talked about the memory for change. And myself and one of the senior co-workers, we also recently wrote a paper on the enacting dialogue that can support promoting community-level reconciliation and peace-building activities in Nepal. So recently, I also consulted with the performability and the staging the stories of suffering by the Leah Davids. She also talks about performability has a great impact on building the human rights approaches of the memorialization, reconciliation, and then so on. So major research question I have dealt with, the first one is, can theater art contribute to the memorialization processes? And likewise, how an organization can provide a common forum in which the parties to the conflict meet and interact, something that is rarely possible in many occasions. The last one is, to what extent and what exactly can the ensuring interaction contribute to the memorialization? These I have tried to find the answer of these three major questions. Considering the methodology, this is an empirical study. So I want to inform you that as authors, I have been engaged in the different peace building activities. That means I have used theater as a tool for reconciliation, tool for healing, tool for memory. Since 2015 to date, I have been working in the different capacity, from individual basis and then the organizational capacity. So this is one of my autobiographical narrative, you can consider it in this way as well. It also reviews some of the relevant secondary resources at the local and then the international as well. Likewise, looking at the case of Ada Satya, this is an theater play that was produced and performed based on the real lifetime stories of the person of enforcedly disappeared, and then the drama is prepared and then performed throughout the country, particularly in 3 different districts of Nepal. And also I counted some of the informal interviews from the audiences of the theater performances, particularly this the half-truth, that after watching this theatrical performance and their audience perception have been collected. The theater for memory, the main result of this research are just like the theater is accepted as a common platform. In any community, the people use the theater as sharing and remembering the everyone. This is the one maybe common platform for every audiences in any community. Likewise, the theater helped to create spaces to increase empathy and memorialization. So they have lots of problems. They might have been hidden inside their heart, but they did not have any space to shared. So the theater might provide that kind of open space, safe spaces, so that they can empower the empathy and memorialization. Likewise, the theater supported to enhance the accesses and inclusivity in the community. So everybody has access there. So this is not one cannot think that I can go or cannot. Everybody can there if they are interested, and they can include it in the process as well. So the theater supported to remembering and acknowledging the past. This means they through the story and through the interaction, many participants found that this is the good option for remembering their loved one who were either killed or unfortunately disappeared. And then when they share their stories, then the people come to know that the reality behind the story, and that's it, all about acknowledging the past as well. So the theater also appealed for the proper memorialization required to memorialize in the loved one, so that it's not only about talking, it's all about addressing these memory issues from the personal as well as communal level. So the major responsibility for addressing the memory is beyond the individual or communal level. Rather, the state or the country should recognize these activities, but the theater can appeal the community level voices, how community level people are thinking about these memories and how these issues are to be addressed. This is what I found. So ultimately what conclusion we can draw from this research. This means it doesn't mean that the theater can impact a lot, but to some extent there is always a possibility theater can contribute in building the peace building, like the memorialization, so that it can advocate for the concerned parties, so they can initiate from individual, communal, and then the national level. So theater can afford a common platform through which the individual can come with their painful story and become more familiar to celebrate with the past opponent. Definitely, this is a common platform for the opponents, so that it's the rebuilding for their relationship. So it also facilitates the way in which individuals and then the group can come with the deep emotional bonds imposed by the insurgency. So after the over of the insurgency, then the people might have lots of emotional bonds in their heart, but they want to express it, they want to remove, they want to bring it out. But where this theater can be one medium to bring their feelings out. And also it is the confidence that this theater can also make a discourse by bringing the different stakeholders into one common platform, so that the memorialization can be possible, and then the need of the community people that is addressed in a way is exactly best way to perform it. And the further research is required to way to memorialization as a pathway to this is the very limited with limited number of respondent, limited community. So it doesn't mean that this research is replicates the narratives of all the people, but somehow there are some points that theater can contribute. So they require more and more resources, so that how community people want to memorialize this loved one is one of the area. So there are some these references I have cited during the writing process, and you can see there I have the presented case. This the Adha Satya, the half truth is that's the drama theatrical performance. How this was shown in the different community. You can see this one is the vehicle that moves in the different communities, and then in the open spaces, and the crew member of the art and then the drama, they perform in the different locations. So it means normally audiences come to theater, but this theater goes to audiences in the community, so that they have a good access to share their story and then learn their story and realize the empathy. This is the end of my story presentation. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. And if you have any question, feedback, comments from the forum audiences, you are welcome. And if you can write me in the given email ID, I will be happy to support. And I will happy to share my learning experiences, and I want to know from you as well. Thank you so much once again, and see you.
Hello everybody, my name is Sikandar Mehdi and I am addressing you from Karachi, Pakistan. My presentation is on aerial bombing and memorials and museums for peace. Aerial bombing is a massive violation of basic human rights, especially the right to life. It's an existential threat and an issue of grave concern for the entire humanity. Regrettably, the issue hasn't drawn global attention towards it the way global campaigns like Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons and Landmines have. The latter campaigns have aroused global concern because of imaginative planning, research and evidence-based scientific studies, convincing facts and arguments, organized launch, and a focused and sustained global campaign. The US has the worst record among the countries resorting to aerial bombing after the Second World War. The list of its victims is long enough. It includes Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Guatemala, Cuba, Iran, Libya, Kuwait, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. However, until very recently, when the drone attacks were condemned widely, aerial bombing has generally remained unnoticed, unchallenged, unresisted, and unpunished. It isn't because there was no awareness about the devastating effects of aerial bombing. No, not at all. As we know, the large-scale use of aircraft as an instrument of warfare was introduced during the First World War, though it was used for the first time in the Italian aerial attack over Libya in 1911. Next year, in 1912, and 2 years before the start of the First World War, Bertha von Suttner, first women Nobel Peace Laureate and an outstanding peace campaigner, had published an essay entitled The Barbarization of the Sky and warned the world against the impending catastrophe. The issue was also taken up by the Hague Conference. Over the years, the issue was taken up by numerous other international forums, including legal and judicial forums. However, brutal and unrestrained air raids continued to rain death and destruction during the First World War, Spanish Civil War, Second World War, Cold War, and after. But it doesn't mean that aerial bombing can't be restrained and banned. The world has bled enough for more than 100 years. Aerial bombing must stop now. It is time that the world raise slogan, no more Guernica, no more Dresden, no more Coventry, no more Tokyo, no more Nogan-Ri, no more Kabul, no more Baghdad, and no more aerial bombing on any city, town, or village on any pretext in future. It seems as if a focused and sustained global campaign against aerial bombing is yet to take off. 4 major post-1945 developments seem to have prevented the rise of a robust global movement. First, the dropping of atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and launch of a sustained movement against nuclear weapons led the anti-war movement to focus on nuclear weapons and neglect to a great extent the atrocities and destructions caused by aerial bombing. Second, the post-1945 literature on war and peace, mostly produced by the victory states, generally condemned bombardment by Germany, Italy, and Japan, and condoned aerial bombing by the Allied powers by saying that these were unavoidable retaliatory measures to confront and demoralize the enemies and to end the war sooner. Third, the US projected the Cold War as a confrontation of ideologies, as a struggle against totalitarian communist societies. It urged the states and the peoples all over to join the struggle to defend freedom at all cost. In addition, the US and its close allies seized for themselves the license to kill and overkill the humans of foreign lands through all military means, including air raids. And fourth, international power game after the collapse of the communist empire in December 1991 made rounds to craft rationale and strategies to justify international military intervention in other countries in the name of counter-terrorism. The US and its allies once again claim that they have the license to kill and overkill other people. It's clear that large-scale human killing through aerial bombing will continue on one pretext or another if not resisted and challenged. As such, a vibrant and resilient global movement against aerial bombing is needed. Groundwork is already being done. Studies on the deadly effects of war are being published regularly. More focused studies on aerial bombing during the contemporary times and earlier times are needed. Likewise, the memories of all the bombarded territories need to be collected, documented, and widely circulated. Again, memorialization and celebration of the past, a past brutalized because of aerial bombing, should continue. Such activities promote awareness about the ugliness of air warfare. Moreover, the monuments, memorials, and museums for peace and their educational programs and cultural activities on the sites and elsewhere are important sources of hope and inspiration. Nevertheless, an equally important task is to mobilize world public opinion against aerial bombing. To illustrate the point, let me refer to randomly selected three tormenting events that took place on three historical sites: Guernica, Tokyo, Nogan-ri. The Basque city of Guernica in Spain was heavily bombarded by the German and Italian bombers on April 26, 1937. In 3 hours, the whole city was destroyed. About 1,600 people were killed. Hundreds more suffered burn injuries. Most of the surviving population was rendered homeless. This air raid took place at a time when the democratically elected progressive government of Spain was facing a civil war. This civil war was caused the death of 1 million people. With the help of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, Spanish dictator General Francisco Franco's rebel forces overthrew the government in Madrid in 1939. Unlike the vanished memory of numerous sites which had suffered aerial bombing from the First World War onward, the memory of Guernica couldn't be banished for long, partly because of Pablo Picasso's immortal painting of Guernica, Carnage, and memorialization of the event through the Guernica Peace Museum. Details of the Japanese fighters' planes attack on Pearl Harbor, a US naval base near Honolulu, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941, are well known. Equally well known are the details of American atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In contrast, the details of American aerial bombing on Tokyo on March 10, 1945 is still little known and little talked about, though the consequences were devastating. In fact, this air raid was the deadliest conventional air raid ever. It was worse than Nagasaki and at par with Hiroshima. In one night, nay, in only 3 hours, during the blackest night ever, almost 270,000 buildings were destroyed and approximately 100,000 people, mostly civilians and mostly women, children and elderly, were killed. This night is remembered in Japan as the Night of the Black Snow. Despite all attempts to bury the memory of Tokyo air raids forever, Katsumoto Saotome and his team didn't let it happen. Katsumoto collected eyewitness account and published several volumes. Eventually, he succeeded in establishing the Center of the Tokyo Raids and War Damage in 2002. The center collects material on air raids, encourages research on related themes, organizes symposium on a regular basis, and promotes peace education and peace awareness. A little over 70 years ago, on July 26, 1950, and within a month of the start of the Korean War, the No-Gun-Ri massacre was started. The carnage continued till the morning of July 29. The death toll for the two Koreas during this war, continuing from 1950 to 1953, amounted to 500,000 people, or 1/6 of the total population of Korea, and yet this war is often referred to as a forgotten war. However, the No-Gun-Ri event couldn't be pushed under the carpet because of the late Chung Yun-yong's and his team's untiring, resolute, and courageous efforts. His struggle is spread over more than 50 years, aimed at seeking justice for the dead and the survivors, and informing the world about the wholesale slaughter of about 300 to 400 men, women, and children. This massacre was prompted by the sudden sweeping in of American military planes and strafing an area where the helpless and hapless Korean people were driven by the American soldiers from nearby areas, promising shelter to them. They were machine gunned from the planes and by the American soldiers on the ground. From then on, Chung Yun-yong's life completely changed. He spent the rest of his life in telling the story of No-Gun-Ri to the world at large. Chung Yun-yong was a justice seeker, a peace activist, and a visionary. Besides fighting for justice for the dead and survivors, he worked very hard to preserve and memorialize the event. When he died on 1st August 2014, at the age of 91, he had the satisfaction that he and his team had succeeded in informing the world about what happened at No-Gun-Ri, driving the US Army to acknowledge in 2001 about the massacre, getting the special act passed by the National Assembly of South Korea on the review and restoration of No-Gun-Ri victims on February 9, 2004, and in immortalizing the dead and the survivors through the establishment of the No-Gun-Ri Peace Memorial Park and Museum. I fully realize that I am offering my presentation at a historic moment, and I feel honored and privileged. I note with appreciation that the No-Gun-Ri International Peace Foundation created the No-Gun-Ri Peace Prize in 2008, and its Institute for Peace, established in 2000, has emerged as an important peace research center. In addition, conferences on peace themes are being held regularly, a journal on peace and human rights is published, and workshops, seminars, and lectures on peace and human rights issues are organized regularly. These are admirable milestones. However, journey to peace is endless. It goes on exploring new landmarks and new destinations. Keeping this in view, I propose the launch of a resilient global movement to control and eventually ban aerial bombing. Perhaps the spread of such a movement would be the best tribute to the victims and survivors of Guernica, Coventry, Dresden, Tokyo, No-Gun-Ri, Kabul, Baghdad, and other bombarded sites. In this context, a solid beginning can be made by the existing memorials and museums for peace which commemorate the memory of the victims of aerial bombing on their sites. They can serve as launching pads for the movement to control and ban aerial bombing. In the larger context, all the cities and places bombarded during the 20th century and after can be involved in the campaign to illegalize and illegitimize aerial bombing. Perhaps memorialization of air raids can be organized annually on an agreed and fixed date of the year to collectively reveal the brutalities of air raids. Likewise, the existing anti-war memorials and museums which highlight the deadly consequences of war should display more prominently the brutality and ugliness of aerial bombing in wars between and within states. In the same way, the envisioning of and planning for future memorials and museums for peace, including the World Museum for Peace and the Bertha von Suttner Peace Museum, proposed by the eminent Peace Museum scholar Peter van den Dungen, should have enough reserved space to showcase the savagery of aerial bombing. I think that the No-Gunnery International Peace Foundation can take the lead and play a leadership role in the campaign to control and ban aerial bombing much before the end of the 21st century. Thank you.
Presenting a rate for peace and reconciliation. Lessons from peace museums in Berlin and Tokyo. 2020 Global Peace Forum Organizing Committee Chairman, Mr. Park Se-bok, Committee Co-Chairs, Mr. Lee Sun-ho and Mr. Jung Kudo, and other committee members and distinguished speakers and honorable guests. I am very honored and happy to be among you here today, even though sadly, my presence and yours are required to be in a virtual way. In keeping with the 2020 Global Peace Forum's theme, quote, a big step toward peace and reconciliation, unquote, my talk will stress the importance of heeding history's warnings through constructing an arrayed, a strong, virtuous foundation for preserving peace. I will also share with you some findings from museum and memorial-related research conducted in Berlin and Tokyo. Lastly, I will attempt to portray lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of human behaviors which may be applicable to peace, education, and reconciliation. 75 years have elapsed since the Allied victory over the Axis powers. If peace is defined as the absence of general war among major powers, the world has enjoyed more years of peace since 1945 than had been known in modern history. To do our utmost efforts for world peace and reconciliation has become more important than ever in this pandemic war. The essence of this paper is predicated upon two well-known philosophical quotations. The first, quote, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, unquote, is credited to the Spanish-born and Harvard-educated philosopher George Santayana, and appears in one of his 6 volumes entitled Life of Reason, published from 1905 to 1906. The second quotation, written in 1945 by American author, educator, and politician Archibald MacLeish, appears as the preamble to UNESCO's constitution. Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. The relationship of these quotations to our purpose today refers to the need to prevent a repetition of past war-related horrors, firstly by acknowledging their occurrences, and secondly through seeking the origin and the reasoning which caused these events to occur. In other words, not only must we never allow ourselves to forget the horrors of the past, but we must also never allow ourselves to forget to use the knowledge gleaned from the past to construct defenses of peace based upon a foundation of truth. Is there a better place for our generations to come to learn the truth than a peace museum? A peace museum is, after all, a place where we can acquire knowledge regarding our ancestors' past mistakes. We can learn how hatred, bigotry, nationalism, militarism, racial superiority complexes, and fanatic devotion to religious idols have fueled geopolitical aggression and the associated horrors of war. Within a peace museum, we can also become aware of the savagery humankind is capable of. It is through this awareness that those of us who have never experienced the horrors of war can learn to appreciate peace. Thus, ideally, while our museums, memorials, or parks like Nogonlis and Nankings are designed to be special places to teach the truth and to promote the ideals of democracy and transparency, there is a caveat. Those of us who defend peace must also seek to prevent self-absorbed politicians and historical revisionists from redesigning or distorting past facts to fit their narrative, whatever those needs may be. In other words, during our endeavor to teach the truth and ideals, we must strive to prevent the mental constructs invoked by willful blindness and continued deniability from impeding those intentions. In an effort to determine the degree to which museums and memorials accurately and realistically portray the past, from 2015, my team and I conducted a series of interviews in the capital cities of Tokyo, Japan, and Berlin, Germany. For our research, we specifically selected to analyze museums from countries which historically chose war and destruction versus peace and construction. For purposes of comparison and discussion, I have selected 2 museums or memorial sites from each locale. Berlin has 2 distinctive World War II memorial sites. The first is the Topography of Terror. The second is the Memorial to the Murdered Jews in Europe, also known as the Holocaust Memorial. Tokyo's 2 sites are the Yushukan, located within the private Yasukuni Shrine, where a Class A war criminals are enshrined, and the private Women's Active Museum on War and Peace, sometimes going by its acronym WAM. The main focus of the Women's Active Museum pertains to military sexual slavery, that is, the so-called comfort woman system set by the Imperial Japanese military during the Holy Great East Asia War of 15 years. While Berlin's Topography of Terror clearly displays the atrocities committed by the Nazis and concurrently attributes responsibility for those atrocities to Hitler's German regime. The Memorial to the Murdered Jews in Europe fails to attribute their responsibility. The failure to acknowledge those who did the murdering and why, accompanied by the omission of the words, quote-unquote, the Holocaust, or quote-unquote, HaShoah, or the quote-unquote, the final solution, from being engraved or otherwise published at the memorial is, in the words of one author, quote-unquote, disturbing. Actually, in addition to describing the acknowledgement failure at the Memorial to the Murdered Jews in Europe as quote-unquote disturbing, in an article published in the New Yorker on July 12, 2012, author Richard Brody describes, quote, the reduction of responsibility to an embarrassing, tacit fact that everybody knows as being the first step on the road to forgetting, unquote. Is Brody's assessment correct? Is the tacit, unspoken fact that quote-unquote everybody knows the quote first step on the road to forgetting, end quote? To consider the answer, we must ask ourselves if the generations who visit the murdered Jews memorial 100 or 200 years from now still be the quote-unquote everybody who knows. While there are similarities and differences among the four museums, one striking similarity between Berlin's memorial and Tokyo's Yushukan pertains to the vague storylines regarding the issue of responsibility. Just as there is no mention of Adolf Hitler and his henchmen on the German memorial, Japan's Yushukan fails to attribute accountability or responsibility to Emperor Hiroshiro and his loyal military leaders. However, both Berlin's Topography of Terror and Tokyo's WAM clearly identify what horrific crimes were committed and clearly assign responsibility for those crimes, representing distinctive models of museum for peace. With regards to the respective governments in Germany and Japan, Germany, aside from naming specific leaders, has admitted its country's role in World War II. In fact, Germany has been forgiven by her former enemies due to its heartfelt remorse. The country offers a new approach to peaceful development by persistently promoting the idea of European integration. Japan's government, on the other hand, has yet to admit its country's aggressions which occurred during the first half of the 20th century. Regardless of the degree to which the Japanese government and associated, quote, historical revisionists, end quote, of Japan's ultra-nationalism cover and justify their ancestors' aggressive quest and rebrand its role in World War II as an innocent act of self-defense against a cruel Western world. Eventually, the Japanese people will be at crossroads since a new era of big data and artificial intelligence is approaching. As even today's global society is one in which transparency and truth is in high demand far more than those in prior centuries when the masses blindly follow their leaders, the Japanese people will someday be forced to choose between a nation of integrity and a nation of lies. In the interim, until this day happens, we as world citizens must strive to keep our museums or parks on the side of peace, founded by integrity. June 2020 marks the 70th anniversary of the Korean War outbreak, and September 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. For any of us watching this presentation today who can reflect back 30 years or 25 years and ask, quote, where did the time go, question, unquote, we realize just how quickly the next 25 years will pass. Consequently, we must also realize that in 30 or 25 years, when we acknowledge the 100th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War and the end of World War II, and hence the end of the Great East Asia War of 15 years, few, if any, will be alive who can remember the horrors of the Holocaust, the human carnage and destruction in Normandy and Nanking, the sadism associated with the biological experiments in Unit 731, the atomic bombs that decimated human life in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the indignities cast upon those so-called comfort women or sexual slaves in legal terms. It is what we do today to ensure the integrity of our museums for peace that will enable future generations of 5G and artificial intelligence to maintain the knowledge needed to maintain peace. Moreover, and needless to say, the year 2020 will be eternally remembered as the year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although not a declared war per se, there are similarities between a pandemic environment and a wartime one. Those of us alive today will never have had to deal with the massive casualties, the loss of freedom, and a sense of helplessness coupled with the loss of faith in prevailing leadership. May just be able to achieve a mere inkling of reality regarding what a wartime environment is like and what our ancestors must have had to do to survive. Then, at the other end of the pandemic spectrum, we also witness those who have chosen to not acknowledge the pandemic's existence, those of us who fail to wear masks, those of us who forego social distancing guidelines, and those of us who fail to heed the warnings by attending large gatherings. We may wonder if this quote-unquote willfully blind type of reprehensible human behavior may in some way parallel the continued deniability attributed to those who still fail to acknowledge their country's complicity in wartime terror. Honesty seems to be the best policy in dealing with this deadly virus. According to CNN, German Chancellor Angela Merkel declared that, quote, "You cannot fight the pandemic with lies and disinformation," unquote. As I started this paper with two quotations, I'd like to end with two again. The first one is attributed to the physician and former U.S. Supreme Court Acting Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., and the second one is written by a great philosopher from Germany, Immanuel Kant. In conclusion, I do hope that the message conveyed in my presentation is that the role of museums for peace and reconciliation in conveying memories for generations to come needs to preserve in its efforts to continuously stretch young minds by invoking new experiences and evolution, thereby never allow young souls and new beings to fall back to old dimensions. Thank you very much. World peace matters. A rate for perpetual peace.
Hello everyone, my name is Marcus Cole and I'm a researcher at the Disarmament and Security Centre. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the 70th anniversary of the Nogunri massacre. And I do hope that my presentation will be able to show you how Christchurch and New Zealand has been able to commemorate trauma in our history. So the title of my presentation is Cities for Peace, the Case of Christchurch. So a little bit about me, I'm a PhD candidate also at the University of Canterbury here, looking at civil society engagement and nuclear disarmament issues. And I work at the Disarmament and Security Centre. So we're an NGO based here and we work primarily to educate young New Zealanders on disarmament and peace issues. So we provide resources also to teachers and academics. We offer internships and experiences to young people, and we reinvigorate public awareness on disarmament and peace issues, as well as provide advice to the government which is the Minister for Disarmament here in New Zealand. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how us as a centre have worked with the Christchurch City Council and other groups to promote peace into our community. So firstly, Cities for Peace really came out in post-war Japan. Many cities declared themselves nuclear-free zones. And currently, the Mayors for Peace network has nearly 8,000 members, and Christchurch is one of these cities. So cities can really serve as living peace museums. And if we look at the theme of this session, human rights and peace education, cities can really be places where mutual understanding and true reconciliation can actually take place. And this is done through creating physical and digital spaces to project peace into the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about how NGOs have collaborated with local government and how cities can become symbols of peace in a sense. So they become sort of living manifestations of what peace can do, and also how trauma can be overcome. So to many of you, Christchurch may conjure up images of earthquakes. So in 2010 and 2011, we had some significant earthquakes which destroyed most of our city, and we lost many, many lives. We are still rebuilding, and this is 10 years later. So this was a really tragic and traumatic part of our history. And also more recently, we had a terrorist attack where a white supremacist went to 2 mosques in our city and shot 51 and killed 51 of our Muslim community, injured many others, and obviously many lives were changed from this. So while Christchurch might be widely known for these recent tragedies, the city actually has a rich history of peace, healing, and encouraging a sense of belonging. And having lived in Christchurch through these recent tumultuous times, I've come to realize that a city's identity is defined not only by its present, but by its past, as traumatic as that may be. And in these moments of trauma, peace and healing and encouraging the sense of mutual understanding really come out. So we saw that in our leadership as well. So our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern here embracing members of our Muslim community. There was a strong sense and a campaign actually titled "They Are Us." And this really brought to the fore that these victims are New Zealanders, and they're no different to any of us, despite being from a minority group. And also here we can see a policewoman wearing a hijab, and she was guarding the entrance to the Al Noor Mosque where the massacre happened. So overcoming tragedies and disasters are really important for cities, but also peace cities as well, because they can allow opportunities to create understanding and more mutual respect and also healing. So a little bit about Christchurch's history. As early as 1947, we saw the first anti-nuclear march. So you can see some locals here. And in 1960, it became the headquarters of the New Zealand Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. By 1982, it had become New Zealand's first nuclear-free city, and this grew to a wider movement, and New Zealand eventually becoming a nuclear-free country in 1987. In 1986, Christchurch locals and a retired magistrate began what would become the World Court Project, which took a case asking for the legality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons to the International Court of Justice and getting an advisory opinion, which really underpins a lot of New Zealand's disarmament policies and also the policies of disarmament for other governments around the world. And in 2002, on the anniversary of 20th anniversary of Christchurch becoming a nuclear-free city, it became New Zealand's first peace city. So this really solidified the peace heritage that the city has. And A lot of this was based on the 2002 United Nations study on disarmament and non-proliferation education. So this was based on recommendations from a group of experts around the world, including Dr. Kate Hughes here in the front, who is actually the director of our centre. She was the only NGO expert and also the only New Zealander on this panel. And what they recommended is really summed up in this quote here. Municipal leaders working with citizen groups are encouraged to establish peace cities as part of the UNESCO Cities for Peace network through, for example, the creation of peace museums, peace parks, websites, and the production of booklets on peacemakers and peacemaking. So here are some examples of what Christchurch implemented after declaring itself a peace city. We established New Zealand's first World Peace Bell website, gifting peace sculpture to the Nagasaki Peace Park, granting Peace City Awards to local peacemakers, and commemorating local peacemakers through seats and trees and plaques, buildings and parks, making museum exhibitions on peace and conflict, Mahatma Gandhi and New Zealand's nuclear-free legislation, peace collections in our city libraries and also university archives, creating a peace walk, erecting interpretive boards around the city on local peace history, and more recently creating a peace park in the earthquake-damaged red zone, which is a part of our city which is unable to be built on now. And also a mosque shooting memorial, which is also underway. So these are examples of how sites of devastation can actually become sites of peace. And while with the earthquakes, no conflict actually took place, people's lives were invariably changed. And peace can really bring solace to people who experience trauma. And the same goes for the mosque shootings. So here are just some photos. This is our mayor ringing the World Peace Bell at our annual atomic bombing commemoration ceremony. And this started way back in the 1970s, where Christchurch locals would lay lanterns on the River Avon to commemorate this. Here's the Nagasaki Peace Park sculpture, which was gifted on behalf of Christchurch. This is a camphor tree in our gardens, in the Botanic Gardens, which was grafted from a hibakujumoku from Hiroshima. This is our mayor unveiling a commemorative seat to a local peacemaker, and a former mayor gifting a Peace City Award to a peacemaker as well. And I'm just going to show you a short clip of a project that I've been working on over the last 2 years.
I'm Kate Hughes from the Disarmament and Security Centre that we run from our home here in Riccarton, Christchurch. And today we're sending over 50 banana boxes filled with papers that I've collected, documenting my work and my husband's work, it's Commander Robert Green, for the last 45 years.
The collection itself, I've helped to collate it, to type it all up, to label it all. It's just going to be fantastic that these are going to be in an archive permanently now and accessible for students and academics and anyone else who's interested in the issues. So this was a really important project to preserve a lot of our local and national peace and disarmament heritage. And this will be accessible into the future for future generations to look back and to see what we've done as a city and also as a country. So it's really important to create these physical spaces for peace and peace education to be projected, but we've also created digital spaces as well. So here are just some examples of websites, which I'll show you in a moment. We have our Peace City website, World Peace Bell, Voices Against War, digital repository, and 2 websites for our centre. So I'll just show you some of them. So here's just our Christchurch City Council website on our Peace City. And this is a project that the Disarmament and Security Centre worked on. And we show here our history, local history, national history, and also some places on how we became a nuclear-free place, and also some links to other places. Here's our World Peace Bell website, which explains how we got a World Peace Bell to our city and some of the history. And this site can really be used as the physical site can be used by community groups. So here's a peace calendar suggesting dates that can be commemorated. We have the Voices Against War website, which is documenting the stories of conscientious objectors in World War I from our region. And here is our Disarmament and Security Centre website, which has resources for students and academics and also teachers, and links to events. And our Legacy website with other publications and resources. And here we have peace stories, documenting the stories of local and national peacemakers. So these are just digital spaces and physical spaces for peace to be projected into the community. And it's a really important aspect of disarmament and peace education, and something I'm quite proud of as a local as well. And I think these are really ever more important in light of the terrorist attack that we experienced last year in our city. So it's important to acknowledge the role of NGOs and citizen groups. And so what we've done to have more community engagement is educate. And here we have a photo of some students from an Australian university come to New Zealand to learn about New Zealand's nuclear-free history. Youth lunch with other students, and we also create lectures and give lectures to community groups, high school students, and also tertiary institutions as well. We provide training to anyone who's interested in learning and experiencing more in the disarmament and peace field. Here is our coordinator with our directors at the United Nations and the negotiations for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in 2017. Here I am with another group of students and also Beatrice Finn of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. This was in Auckland. And we offered a DSC fellowship position to a student to come and train with us. And also I was selected along with one other student to attend the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference at the United Nations this year. But this has been postponed due to COVID, so hopefully it'll happen one time. So just to recap, Cities for Peace really are symbolic in their nature, and they can act as living peace museums and symbols of peace. By creating these physical and tangible spaces for peace to be projected into the community. So these digital and multimedia sites are also important to create and raise public awareness. And they can also be places of healing despite tragedies and trauma. So that's what we've seen with our terrorist attack here and our earthquakes. And I guess this is a similar aspect to what has happened in Nogunri with the Peace Park and also the museum there. And it's also important to acknowledge the work of civil societies and other groups to work with City Council. So it shouldn't just be up to a City Council to implement all of these initiatives. It really needs to be a collaboration. So to sum up, I'll just end with a quote from the United Nations study, and I think this sums up why we do the work that we do. It states that disarmament and non-proliferation education and training is a lifelong and multifaceted process in which the family, schools, universities, the media, the community, NGOs, governments, parliaments, and international organizations all participate. It is a building block, a base of theoretical and practical knowledge that allows individuals to choose for themselves values that reject violence, resolve conflicts peacefully, and sustain a culture of peace. So thank you very much. I do hope that you are able to visit our city, Christchurch, New Zealand one day. And I would also love to visit Nogunri as well. If you are interested in learning more about this, please do engage with our social media, follow us, and also you can look on our website as well for more information. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Hello, my name is Pieke Bendit from Inspiring Culture in Brussels, Belgium. As an expert in art and cultural diplomacy, I will approach the concept of a culture of peace through the lens of Peace Museum. Peace Museums worldwide are vital instruments for the promotion of peace, education, and the creation of a culture of peace, whether they are privately funded or public institutions. what is the culture of peace and peaceism. I would like to start with clarifying the concept of museum and the culture of peace. What is the culture of peace in the Peace Museum? Does this mean a museum filled with symbols of peace, such as roses and pictures of doves and hearts? Let's look at the word culture, peace, and museum. The definition of a museum that most people have agreed upon until today is still that given in 2007 in the statute of the International Council of Museums, ICOM. A museum is a non-profit permanent institution in the service of society and its development, open to the public, which acquire, conserve, research, communicate, and exhibit the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purpose of education, study, and enjoyment. The meaning of the expression culture of peace was articulated by the United Nations during the General Assembly on November 5, 2009. As part of a resolution for the promotion of interreligious and intercultural dialogue, understanding, and cooperation for peace. The United Nations document defines culture of peace as a set of values, attitudes, modes of behavior, and ways of life that reject violence and prevent conflict by tackling their roots cause to solve problems through dialogue and negotiation among individual groups and nations. The same ideas was at the core of the creation over 60 years ago of UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Since war began in the mind of man, it is in the minds of men that the defense of peace must be constructed. Military history and the history of war have been studied and often celebrated for a very long time. An historical approach of the idea of peace is, however, something very recent. It's really emerged in the 60s in different countries with different culture. The culture of peace, the culture of peace unites the people who shape it as they look for happiness and freedom. It is the search of this common ground of peace that the Nobel Peace Prize has been honored annually since 1901. Now that we have clarified the concept, let's look at how multiple countries have developed peace museum as a way to prevent war. It actually started in 1901. The history of the first peace museum at the beginning of 20th century, the world's first peace museum was founded by Jan Bloch at the turn of 20th century. He was probably influenced by the intellectual and cultural climate of bien fin de siècle, which was to be found in most European capitals. Jan Bloch was born in Radom in 1836 and died in Warsaw in 1902. He was an entrepreneur, banker, and railroad tycoon. The broad public saw him more as a military terrorist than a pacifist activist. In 1898, Bloch published a little noticed 6-volume book titled The War of the Future in its technical, economic, and political relation. The following years, The work was in a single volume under a new title. Is war now impossible? Intellectual elite were very interested in it. He was a participant at the first Hague Peace Conference in the summer 1899, and together with Baroness Bertha von Schöttner, the first woman to have the Nobel Peace Prize in 1905, and Frédéric Passy, first Nobel Peace Prize in 1991, they lobbied to find an agreement on disarmament. During his last year, he was an ardent peacemaker and worked to set up the Museum of War and Peace in Lucerne. Bloch organized it in 13 sections, presenting the weapon of modern army and the warning about the cost of the impossible war. The museum opened officially 6 months after his death. It was liquidated after World War I. Since Jan de Bloch, most museums evolved from a war and peace concept, where war and peace were presented as the two sides of the same coin, to peace museum, where the idea of stable and lasting peace is seen as something that can be built and sustained. Now I'm going to present some photos of the Peace Museum worldwide. If we look at the list of the Peace Museum worldwide, based on this criteria, a peace museum does not glorify war. From the start in 1991, with Bloch Museum to today, we notice the number of peace museums is rising to around 120 today. Japan has the highest number of peace museums at around 55, 23rd public and 32 private ones. The most famous one is Hiroshima Peace, founded in 1955. The Peace Museum tend to show the horror of war from the victim perspective. It is often the case in public peace museums. They avoid showing Japan as an aggressor. Like Professor Toshifumi Murakami said in the International Conference of Peace Museum Ostend, Belgium, the 5th 9th of May 2003, the emphasis is on atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also the US air raid on various cities. Since 1980, many peace museums have been created. This can be explained by the anti-war and anti-nuclear movement, and also Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution forbidding nuclear weapons. There are some differences between Western peace museums and Asian ones. In the former, emphasis is on the conflict resolution and peace history, while in the later, the approach is more respectful or of a neutral historical truth. Today, generally, peace museums attempt to embrace peace and war, which are fully complementary. They educate the public to have a positive attitude in being proactive in the search of peace for their generation and those of the future. So, some examples. The Peace Museum in Bradford, UK. The initial idea of creating a peace museum arose in mid-80s from Gerald Devrett of the Give Peace a Chance Trust. It is only in 1992 that the Peace Museum Bradford was established. It is the only museum dedicated to the history and often untold story of peace, peacemakers and peace movement in the UK. The Peace Museum aims to engage, inform and inspire through items in its collection and exhibitions, learning and education activities for all sectors of the community. Learning and posing questions about equality, diversity, cohesion, peace and nonviolence, telling the story of peacemakers and peacemaking. As well, in September 1992, the International Network of Peace Museums was convened by Give Peace a Chance, in association of the Department of Peace Study of the University of Bradford. This was the first global meeting of directors and staff of peace and anti-war museum and related institutions. Another example in France, it's the Memorial De Communism, also known as the Center for History and Peace. Opened in 1988, the Memorial De Communism, also known as the Center for History of Peace, is one of the most comprehensive museums about World War II. It's unique in France. The museum emphasizes on peace rather than war. While telling the story of the origin of World War II, the war itself, and its aftermath, the museum keep its focus on the challenge of achieving peace. Another example is the South Korea. South Korea has a Center for Peace Museum in Seoul. South Korea has a war museum but not a peace museum. They try to develop a culture of peace to overcome the war military culture that permeates South Korea. The Center for Peace Museum was set up in November 2003 in the wake of the late 1990s apology movement for the massacre of civilians committed by the Korean force during the Vietnam War. In order to nurture peace-loving minds, photo and painting exhibitions have been held under such themes as Japanese aggression, the Iraq War, and the South Korea die-hard military culture stemming from the Korean War and the resulting division of the Korean land. And another example in Asia, you have the Cambodia Peace Museum, opened on the 23rd of October 2018. The Center for Peace and Conflict Studies is developing the Cambodia Peace Museum as an educational and experimental space geared towards supporting a wider national healing process, one which highlights the resilience of Cambodia people in transforming conflict and overcoming adversity, as well as the nation's potential as a peace-building learning center for the world. To conclude, Peace Museum worldwide seems to understand that it's not enough to criticize war and display the horror of war, but make visitors think of peace and act for peace. It is living with mindfulness. They take their mission to educate in making the culture of other country known, host exhibitions from the other culture, honor peacemakers, war resistors, heroes of non-violence of the past and present, such as Gandhi, Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi. These people, they all received the Nobel Prize, but only the women received Nobel Peace Prize till today. Nadia Murad, Malala Yousafzai, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Lema Glovewey, Tawakkol Karman, Wangari Maathai, Shirin Ebali, Jody Williams, Rigoberta Menchú, Aung San Suu Kyi, Mor Teresa, Betty Williams, Mairead Corrigan, Emily Greenbach, Jan Adams, Bertha von Suttner. And if you want to find completely the exact list, if you want to have the exact list of Peace Nobel Prize, you can see it on my book, that I just published, Lockdown Journey, Recipe from Around the World. And you have on the page of Albania, you have a complete list and what exactly this 17 women peace women have done to win, to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you.